very short guzzle of your cups of tea and coffee. My apologies, but we must press on. Now, as you're aware, we have a handful of workshops this morning. The first of those is the Waipa Community Spatial Plan update. Now, just a reminder that the first 3 of our workshops obviously are open to the public and therefore being live streamed, and the last is taken in public excluded. So welcome, Kirsty and Vanessa, nice to see you both.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora koutou. So this is an informal verbal update that Vanessa will lead you through. We have previously indicated that we would provide a more comprehensive update to you at this meeting. However, as you're aware, we have had interactive sessions and we have further active sessions scheduled with you next week. So on that basis, this is an informal, quite short update, but provides an opportunity for you also to ask questions of Vanessa and I. So with that in mind, I'll hand over to Vanessa now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsty, and morena to all. Yes, as Kirsty just mentioned, this is really an informal kind of update. As you know, the spatial plan is quite a dynamic and complex project, which is evolving quite quickly. So it's really important to keep in touch with you all, guys, and making sure that you are, continuously aware and communicated on progress. Phase 2 of the project is tracking really well, as the project manager reasonably comfortable with its progress. A lot has happened over the past few months, and just to kind of re-indicate that we entered phase 2 of a project back in October 2021, so only a few months ago. As you are aware, the draft future scenarios, which are the base of our the base foundation of our spatial plan, future spatial plan, are tracking along well as well. We've had several workshops with elected members, with Waipa District Council managers and business case writers to align and integrate the work that is currently on development. We are at the stage now where the project team is collating, reviewing all those feedbacks and responding to those as well. We have now invited elected members for two workshops on the in the start of December to look at our place summaries, and those workshops will look at focusing identifications of priority issues and opportunities for the places outlined in the Waipa Growth Strategy 2050. So we're going to look at those places in more details. A little bit on our Mana Whanua iwi workstream. We concluded a free hui, which form actually the first round of hui to introduce the project to our partners. This is those hui actually took place on the 27th of October, the 1st and the 10th of November. And one of the conclusion of us hui was we would go ahead with a spatial wananga, which is due to take place this Friday on the 3rd of December, where we're going to look at whānau, hapu and iwi, and discussing their aspiration in the council and looking at social, cultural, spiritual and economic aspiration within specific areas, either of their rohi or throughout the district. So this, as I said, will take place on the 3rd of December, and we would have a bit of an update for you at the next meeting in the new year. On stakeholders, we are currently formulating the final list, and we'll be contacting, we have actually started contacting some of our stakeholders. It's taking a little bit more time, but we just want to make sure that we actually identify the individuals that can champion the spatial plan within their organization, and who actually can sit and champion their organization within the project as well. So this work is in progress as well. As I said, we are in progress to contact those stakeholders. On the internal and external communication and engagement work stream, we have also had an internal engagement plan currently being progressed and being finalized. This is to outline how the project is being actually communicated within council, but also outside council. A final point actually of the update is that we keep on having those weekly Friday mail out to all elected members and iwi partners to make sure that you are kept on progress with the project. So a quick update here. As always, if there is any questions or discussion that needs to happen, please don't hesitate to kind of either contact myself or Kirsty. Sorry, I paced through all those points, trying to make up for the time. Is there any question or anything that you want me to clarify? Because I know that I might have gone a little bit too quickly now on those points.
That was just pretty good, Vanessa. Any questions for Vanessa or Kirsty in respect to this project?
Madam Chair, Graham here.
Graham.
Yeah. On the Friday meeting with iwi, will there be any councillors in that meeting so they can gauge the direct feeling to come back to us?
The Spatial Wananga is uniquely for the collecting aspiration from Mana Whenua and iwi, and that is a session that we're going to hold with iwi representative at this point. But we could come back with an update and a summary of those after without an issue. Yeah.
Just to maybe expand on that. So Mayor Jim attended the 3 hui that were held online at the end of October and through November. So we would be anticipating that a lot of work is happening prior to Christmas. So we are anticipating a comprehensive update to you at your first meeting in 2022, which will provide an overview of all of the work streams. We do also have a PCG meeting tomorrow. And we'll be providing a comprehensive update to the PCG members. Yep.
Thanks, Kirsty.
So, Kirsty and Vanessa, is this Spatial Wananga in place of or addition to the next round of hui? Because my understanding is that there were 3 hui, then they were going to do another round of 3 hui. So is this on top of or a place of or what?
It was an outcome from the 3 hui in that first round, whereby we had different attendances over each of the hui. We started looking at the GIS tool and how that could be used to assist Mana Whenua iwi to share information with us. There were some concerns raised as to ensuring protection of information. So we've been doing some work in that space. And this is an opportunity now for us to actually adopt a more hands-on interactive session, building on the feedback from those earlier hui. So actually adopting an approach whereby we, adopt a district-wide approach and people are able to share what they are comfortable sharing. So it is an outcome of the previous 3 hui, which were the first round, and it's really just wrapping up the outcome from that. So it's something that wasn't initially planned, but there was a good level of feedback and participation that identified a desire to proceed with this.
And
Kirsty, the reason I ask is that, and Susan knows this, Susan was in a meeting where she was the only person linked to the farming community. Now there's 4 or 5 of us that could have been at that meeting, and she was pretty hardly caned by people in that meeting, but had no support. And I'm very, very conscious of that real meeting feel coming back to the councillors about what took place and what we could work on, expand on, or encourage. That's all.
Absolutely valid feedback, and I think that might have been in relation to another a project, Councillor Webber. So absolutely, I understand that invites were extended and that perhaps not everyone who was invited attended, but that is a very real issue that we are ensuring, and what we're doing from that is actually looking at having additional focus groups looking at specific interest areas that we need to have input from. So absolutely take on board that feedback. And look, we are wanting to ensure that elected members have oversight, input, and are able to contribute. This is our plan, your plan, our community plan. So yeah, absolutely, thank you for that feedback, and certainly anticipate that there would be opportunities for collaborative input as we progress the project.
Thanks, Kirsty.
Just to add to this, this is why I think we're taking maybe a little bit more time regarding our stakeholders, making sure that we have actually all the right people and taking feedback from previous engagement. We'll have kind of showed maybe those gaps. So completely taking that feedback on board, and we will have actually a list that we could maybe share potentially, so that we make sure that all those gaps are actually identified. And if we need to take the time to identify the persons, we can actually integrate the plan so that there is every representation from the community, and we have actually a community spatial plan will represent every part of our community. Absolutely. Yeah.
So just to add to that, through you, Madam Chair, we can make that list when final available to elected members, because as you're aware, we had presented an initial sort of outline to the PCG and then engaged with elected members and sought feedback on those stakeholders. So it seems appropriate that we, close that loop with you before we go out and contact them. So we, as Vanessa mentioned, there are some contacts underway to ensure that we get the right people through for each respective organisation, but we will share that with you. Excellent.
Thanks for that, Kirsty and Vanessa. Any other questions for these two fine women? No? Excellent. Hey, look, thank you for your update, and I look forward to our next group meeting to progress this project.
Thank you all so much.
Right. So we're caught up time. Look at us go. The next workshop for 2 days consideration is the economic wellbeing strategy, and that's brought to you today by Steve Tritt. And I thought I saw him floating around. So there he is. Morning, Steve.
Yeah, good morning, councillors and your worship. Just let me share my screen if I can do that. Is there the presentation on the screen?
Yeah, it's not running as a presentation, but we can see your screen. Oh, it is.
Right. So thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce the economic wellbeing strategy. This is a verbal update to elected members on the proposed process. And this is an opportunity for you to provide absolutely early input into the direction of the strategy. We have approached a business advisory group to provide some sector input into the strategy development, and there will be workshop opportunities for elected members to both input into the strategy in the really early stages, and then to review the strategy towards the end. So the economic wellbeing strategy, the current strategy was adopted in 2012. It was prepared in consultation with partners, stakeholders and sector representatives. This approach will be used again. Expert opinion will be sought along the way, and we make heavy use of infometrics and BRAD for our economic commentary. The strategy will be workshopped with elected members early in the new year, and you will receive updates of activities through the Friday Outlook. The strategy will be brought back to Council for approval at the May 2022 meeting. So, working vision for the strategy is a plan to create a diverse, resilient and sustainable economy that serves the current needs, the current and future community. So perhaps we can come back to that at the end. That's a working vision. We need to start somewhere. Perhaps we can have a conversation about what we value and why, and how our values can be pursued through economic wellbeing. So we want to identify key economic issues and risks going forward. We want the strategy to support activity that promotes the economic wellbeing strategy vision, and to support community outcomes based on the 4 wellbeings. And we want the strategy to support Waipa's vision, community outcomes and external strategic priorities. So this is where the economic wellbeing sits with 4 economic wellbeings in the economically progressive, and with our external strategic priorities with our focus for the next 3 years. How the strategies relate to each other. You've just heard the community spatial plan. Underneath that are environmental, transport, growth strategies and economic wellbeing strategies, and obviously links to the LTP annual plan and the district plan. So that's kind of the environment of strategies. So what's changed? A lot's changed since 2012. Although the economic development has served us the strategy has served us really well. So Waipa has been recognised as a high growth district. The 4 wellbeings have been re-included in the LGA. Council's intention to be strategy led. A global panic has created uncertainties around the future structure of the economy and our response. A new government with high ambitions for change, acceptance of climate change and sustainability as fundamental issues for policy direction and action. And together with a widespread sentiment to grow the economy and communities in ways that are more diverse and resilient, sometimes talked about as in grow back better. So our original 7 key theme areas in the 212 strategy were business growth and attraction, tourism, high performance sport, information technology, or you can see them, sustainable agriculture, agritech, aviation, education, youth employment. We've got together a project advisory group, a business advisory group, which will be one of our key partners, along with other stakeholders and elected members. And the purpose of this is to provide some external and sector input. It includes Maori business owners, investors, business-facing organisations, chamber eyesight, and covers sectors like tourism, high-performance sport technology, and agriculture. Mana Whenua, Te Waka and Hamilton Waikato Tourism are also local and regional stakeholders. Some of those have produced their own plans, which will inform the development of the strategy. So I want to stress that the strategy is council-led, will be developed with key partners and stakeholders, will use a project advisory group and elected member workshops. This same presentation will be taken to the iwi Consultative Committee tomorrow. There'll be a couple of workshops with a business advisory group this side of Christmas, and the purpose of these is to provide external and sector support. Early ideas will be brought back to council in a Friday update because the 14th of December meeting is really busy. And discussions with wider stakeholder groups will be held February and March. So a verbal update to SPMP on the 1st of February next year, and a workshop with elected members, potentially SPMP, on the 1st of March next year. And that's another opportunity to workshop some ideas and strategy. The aim is to have the strategy for adoption by council on 31st of May. So that's a quick run through the strategy. Possibly there's a further discussion around the vision for the strategy, a conversation about what we value and why in Waipa. So thank you, Susan. I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Steve. Look, I've got a lot of annotations I've made to this document, but I guess I'll just open the floor. Roger had his hand up first, and then Philip.
Yeah,
and
thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, Steve, thank you very much for that. It's good, isn't it? Who are the elected members rep on the business advisory group that's taking this forward?
There's none on that group yet. That's a discussion with business people. We will look at the composition of a strategy group and how you would want to join into outsiders in discussing the strategy. So I'm looking for your proposition on how to be involved in that group.
I'd certainly like to be involved if that's possible. I'm just wondering as well whether it's an idea to get elected members with that business, basically to really observe and to see what the recommendations and issues are as we go forward.
Yeah, I think that would be really useful because this is your strategy. It's your strategy, our strategy. So hearing from business leaders as they think about what's important would be really useful.
Phil, have you got this? Phil,
Yep.
Claire, then Lou.
Yep, thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, thanks, Steve. It's really a great report and very thorough and very exciting, and would love to be involved if there's an opportunity there too. So, but yeah, great report. So thank you very much.
Just through you, Madam Chair, just picking on the the point that Roger made about, interacting elected members and the business advisory group or representatives from the business sector. I guess we've had some limitations in terms of operating in this lockdown environment and, trying to progress work remotely. Is great, and we're adaptable, but not so great in terms of having those interactive discussions about things such as strategy development. However, now that we're moving into the traffic light system, I would anticipate that might provide us with further opportunities to actually connect in person, and that we could look at a dedicated forum for that collaboration.
Thanks, Kirsty. Claire and then Lou.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Well, Steve, I'm really pleased that we're looking at this. I'm really excited actually about the possibilities in developing a fresh strategy. And I'm a little bit concerned actually that it looks like we've got the same kind of people around the table and the same established businesses. So I'm really conscious of the change in mindset that's coming with, the imperatives of emissions reduction and living more sustainably and looking after our natural environment. And I would be really keen to see some early work done on what might be some really good business opportunities, new ones, that are looking in those areas. I'd love to be involved with that. You probably know I'm involved in an ecological corridor project linked Maungatautari with Pirongia, and that's actually got amazing potential for mana whenua business opportunities, as well as, I suppose, encouraging regenerative or organic food products that really, make a statement about Waipa district, I guess, a localism. And I'm also wondering if some analysis has been done on how people's spending patterns have changed, through lockdown. We're not out of the lockdowns yet, but should we be, doing some strategizing around what have those patterns been, and should we be helping our existing businesses adjust and, make the most of those? So I can see a lot of change happening in our commercial and business space. And I'm also really encouraged with some of the big players, like I've had a bit to do with Fonterra, with the ecological corridor project, and they are really committed actually to be seen to be right behind this new way of operating, I think. And so, I'm quite excited about it. I think it's really great we're doing it. I'm just wanting to make sure that those emerging things that we're seeing are really going to be handled well.
Can I answer just the last question about the effect of the lockdown? I've commissioned an analysis on the effect of lockdown on the main street, on our main streets, on our CBDs. The economy's done exceptionally well, as Brad Olsen keeps reporting, but it's not necessarily been the same for everybody, and everybody hasn't enjoyed the same success. So I'm commissioning some work with Market View Verisk, but I have to wait till data comes through, and I had to wait till the lockdown was kind of over to make sensible analysis of pre-post lockdown. I can provide data on kind of the global 2020 lockdown and its effect, but it's quickly disappearing from the data and probably giving us a new problem around visitor and event spend. So yes, that data is important. It's a sector of our economy that's not done really well. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thanks. That would be fantastic, Steve, because, I think we need to look after our existing businesses and help them adapt. And there are opportunities out there, aren't there? People still have money to spend, and they do want to spend it locally. Yeah, so thanks.
Steve, Graham here.
Hey,
yes,
Graham.
Can I speak?
Go if you like.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, Steve, one of the big issues at the moment, I was forced to go shopping the other day with Jenny, is this the stock is not in the shops. The stuff that you want has not arrived. And the shipping people are being very, very selective on the ports they call into. On top of that, last year it was $1,600 US to get a container up to China. That has gone to $10,000 US. So you've got a lot of food and commodity price inflation coming through. But just some of the empty shelves in the shops that we've had a look at, and all the retailers that were there, I was asking them about their stocks and they were waiting. So it's a real issue.
Yeah, and Graham, all I can do is provide commentary on that.
I know. Yeah, I know.
But it is a problem. I mean, even the supermarkets are looking, a little forlorn sometimes.
Yeah. Well, Countdown have had a 3-day strike, and at the moment, if you go up to Fresh Choice or Countdown in Cambridge, it is diabolical. But we have got toilet paper.
Thanks, Graham. Yeah, supply chains have certainly been put under the spotlight through this entire pandemic, haven't they? Things that most people just took for granted. So, thanks for your observations. Lou, Marcus, then Liz.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Steve. That was an excellent article. I'm totally in agreement with a lot of what you said, but I will say one thing. I do think you want to formalise that group that we're talking about so that we do have some council input in there, because I think it's essential that we as councillors are aware of what the needs and we have in our local community. As you said, this current crisis that we've gone through, this economic and the pandemic, has been a little uneven, and there's quite a number of issues, particularly those in the hospitality industry and other industries, those organising large events. We've lost a lot of major events in Karapiro, right throughout our society, right throughout our whole Waipa region. And we're going to find that will slowly impact. I also happen to agree very much with what Graham just said with inflation and price inflation at the moment. So those issues are going to impact a lot on businesses after Christmas, and the rising interest rates, which are almost a fait accompli at the moment.
Thanks, Lou. Marcus, then Liz.
Steve, are you working with like Gina and Corinne, since they're working with the businesses and stuff already to get data and things like that, and using the information and bits that they already know of what's happening in town with business recovery and things?
Yeah, I'm on the same COVID recovery group that they're on, and they report back through. So yes, I'm sharing information and very occasionally coffee with them. So it's an all person defence, I guess, for the current times.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I can just add to that, that these strategies also dovetail into the development of the community spatial plan, and both Corinne and Gina have been actively contributing to the work that is underway in terms of the place-based assessments. So yes, they are involved, and there are linkages across and into this work stream. Councillor Gower.
Thanks, Kirsty. Liz, and then Miriata.
Thanks, Susan. Hey, really interesting report, Steve. I actually really enjoyed reading it. I guess watched Waipa grow and develop for such a long time now. We've had strong tourism, strong sporting flavours, for many, many years. I kind of feel like we need a bit of a backup plan at the moment because, with COVID wrecking everything that I've built up, just my own personal business, I kind of look at sporting and tourism and think, gosh, we just might have, we've got a lot of recovery. It's going to take a long time to get back to where we were. So I'm looking at agriculture in your report, and it's been the I guess the reassuring. It's been there for a long time. It's been a bit of a superstar in these recent times. So I'm wondering, with that advisory group, really like to see, where are the trends in agriculture? It just feels that we're really lucky with You know, we've got some great sectors already here, but what can we do to be even more innovative in that field? It's a real strength of Waipa's, so I'd love to see that advisory group spend perhaps a little bit more time on that, get some key players from that industry so that we can really explore and develop it a little bit more. So yeah, just kind of think for the moment, as much as I love tourism and sporting, I'm not too sure it's going anywhere right now. So I just want a bit of a backup plan, as I mentioned.
Yeah, I think in those sectors that are really badly affected, retail, visitor, tourism, events, you know, we have to dig deep and see where the next kind of trends are coming from. Would you see an agriculture kind of group separated out of the kind of stakeholder group, so there can be a really strong focus on what's happening in agriculture? Because there are trends already.
Yeah, and this is what I was thinking. It's the innovation around that industry that I think we should really grasp right now. There's some really neat stuff coming out. So there's, I actually think that the rural councillors, you know, who are all in this group, we could probably put together a pretty impressive high-powered group, I think, that could develop, you know, into something quite special. So I see Susan's nodding her head there, but I think, hey, here's an opportunity for us. Let's grasp it and try and, really nurture it rather than it being just part of it, you know, and I just don't want it to get lost when I just see it's such a giant opportunity in front of us.
Yeah, look, Liz, you took the words right out of my mouth. That was one of my big issues and things that I felt that screamed out for me reading the review document. I've scribbled down here in all my inane writings that Waipa District Council spends zero in that agri-business space. And yet there's around 500,000 annually dropped into tourism, which is looking reasonably precarious for now. Particularly if you look at Aotearoa Tourism's findings from their recent meeting, thinking we're not going to get back to a new norm, whatever that looks like, for another couple of years anyway. And you know, if you look at the GDP production for our district, you're talking about agri sector producing 546 million out of the 749 million. And then tourism from that is currently about 137 odd million with your visitor spend. So, you know, if you start pro-ratering the return on your investment, it looks pretty sad for the agribusiness, which has kept us afloat the whole way through. So, look, I think there is a whole lot of stuff that we can do in this space around being leaders and championing sustainable agriculture and new innovation. And it sort of touched on some of what Claire was saying as well. So I just felt that this is an area that, excuse the puns, right for the picking. It's timely, it's timeless. People will always need to eat. People don't necessarily always need to compete in high performance sport, but they will always need to eat. And all the data that comes out in terms of credence attributes around the way we create our food, protein and fibre in New Zealand, are things that people seek internationally and prepared to pay quite handsomely for. And certainly one of the big issues that came out of our last lockdown was food security and being able to be confident of its authenticity. So I think it's a massive space that we need to focus and more time, energy, and resource in our council on. And just while I've got the floor there, my feeling, everybody seems to have been singing praises, which is fantastic, but I read this and I felt it was all about Cambridge. It was a really neat discussion about Cambridge, and that's fantastic. But I think Pirongia was only mentioned on the first time on page 35 out of 57 pages, and Te Mutu was reasonably absent as well, and Ohopol doesn't even exist, and neither does much of the rural community. So I guess I felt that it's a very definitely a Cambridge-focused document, which I would like to think that going forward we'd actually be able to put some greater balance on, even down to things like the involvement in education and youth employment space. All of the focus there was on Cambridge High School, I don't even know if there was ever been any attempt to link up with Te Awamutu College and find out what could happen in that space. And I looked at the SSEP website and listened to a lot of the videos on there, and I accept that Te Awamutu College has its own farm, but it would be helpful if perhaps an approach to the college could be made. Yeah, look, I have so much here, so perhaps we could touch base offline, but those are the two things for me. Let's not miss the opportunity on what agriculture can offer our community going forward in terms of new innovations, sustainability, and all those sorts of things. And let's try and get a better balance in this document around it not being all Cambridge focused.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Totally back you there, Susan. I'll totally back you there, because that's what my thoughts are. Thank you.
So
Thanks,
through you, Madam Chair, absolutely, we'll follow up, Susan. This review document is looking at the strategy that was developed in 2012. So absolutely agree that there are huge opportunities for us now to seize and chart the future direction for Waipa. Yep.
Perfect. Excellent.
Yeah, and Susan, I pick up your point. It's not only agriculture; it's food, and food sovereignty, and quite a bit of the value in the economy comes from value add. You know, what Fonterra is doing in both places and what Food Innovation's doing. So yeah, it would be great to kind of wrap agriculture and food up together and say we need to do well in both of those areas.
Great, fantastic. Now, Miriata, you've been waiting very patiently while I had my rant.
So patiently. No, thanks, Susan. I completely agree with you too. I think some areas definitely for improvement in the report. I think it's a good start. I see on page, I think 10 of the report, talks about the education and youth employment, which Susan sort of touched on before. And, you know, the report that Brad had presented to us, I think it might have been at the beginning of the year, around some of the trends and where we're heading in terms of employment, really focused on vocations and trades as well. And so I'm really keen to see, you know, more of a connect with tertiary providers too. That connection between education and into employment is really, really critical. It's one aspect of it. The other aspect, I think, mentioned a few times, is around innovation. So creating spaces for that innovation to occur is also really, really critical. I know there's, especially during this time, and I'm really heartened to see Māori business in there, because there's a lot of innovation and work happening in that space as well, at iwi levels right down to the individual level. So yeah, if we can keep building on those throughout the report, that would be great. And that's me.
Yeah, thanks, Miriata. Who else I have here? Oh, Steve, did you want to respond to that at all?
No, I absolutely think the pathways for young students and school leavers and NEETs into employment and training are really important. We've got a massive skills and talent issue. For years, we just grabbed migrants from overseas. Now we've got to grow our own kind of students, make transitions to workplace. SSEP is a program that I've been involved in that is really successful, reaching into schools, but that's only offered in Cambridge High School at the moment. Our students at college and our NEETs, getting them into employment is really important for our community as well.
That youth voice too is really critical. So I'm wondering how that can also be incorporated somehow. If we're building succession planning in this space, then that may be an option for us as well. But there's heaps of stuff happening in the tertiary sector at the moment with Te Pukenga as well, as other providers to help connect. There's new workforce development councils being formed to help provide the connection. My worry is that although the training is provided, is that what our rangatahi or young people actually want to do and with their lives? I know we're seeing it's like clear as, trades, get a trade, or vocations, or even, horticulture, agriculture, into those areas. My question is, how much of that our rangatahi population actually want to be heading into those areas? And I think that's where that innovation is really, really critical. As part of the ownership to help bridge and then contribute into the economy.
Mm. Yeah, no, good points, Mariata. I found that stuff, the videos from SEP, really interesting, actually, and it sort of leads on from what you're saying, Mariata. But I guess you can't know what you don't know, and I suppose that's the big problem with this, isn't it? As adults, and some of us older than others and been around a bit longer than others, we're aware of a lot more of those things out there. But it's, so you can't know what you don't know. Right, Lou, you've got your hand up. You've been waiting patiently too.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just quickly over that, I looked at the original 7 key theme ideas. I see aviation is on there, and I look at what's happening in our aviation industry at the moment and wonder whether that is going to be sustainable in the future. I looked at agriculture and Agritech, and I would divide those two things. Agritech is quite an interesting figure. I've worked in the agricultural industry, as you know, for 20 odd years as a mechanic and as a person involved in it. And in actual fact, we can develop technologies to relieve the actual need for lots of people on the land. But we can actually do that, and we don't actually develop that. We rely too much on overseas, and we have a lot of people that are very innovative in our own country. These sort of issues can be developed. The other thing I'm very keen with what Mariata was saying, I think actual fact is get people out of the classroom, get people into a situation where they are in a cadet scheme, like we had with our original apprenticeship schemes. And I trained over 15 apprentices in the time I was there, and I still have a relationship with them, but it was a one-on-one basis. And we actually worked very well in developing the people to have skills. It doesn't necessarily mean that people have to put gumboots on and walk on a farm. It just means that they learn technologies and ideologies that can sustain our whole of our economic community. And I think that we've got to look at this type of involvement to try and get our society looking at creating a more sustainable society.
Yeah, one of my approaches with secondary school education partnerships was linking teachers and students to employers and then leaving them to get on with it. And if you've looked at the videos, the most powerful ones are from the students who suddenly see the relevance of maybe chemistry or something else in their curriculum. And also from the teachers who have said to me, now I've got something relevant that I can talk to the kids about in terms of employers. So, students don't need to understand how to drive a tractor. They need to understand what a tractor does and what a farm looks like. So first steps first, developing that kind of relationship between students and the employment area is fabulous. And being only one person, I kind of leave that to SSEP to continue that. But supporting that kind of pathway stuff is really important.
To agree with you, Steve, on that. And as I say, creating it and just remaining, when you talk of like driving a tractor or even knowing what a tractor does, very, very important. But as I say, there's so many industries tied around that tractor. You don't have to milk cows or actually drive the tractor. You can actually be somebody who supplies a tyre, supplies the diesel, supplies even the parts of it. So there's so many bits of infrastructure around it.
Steve, I've listened to you with great interest. I think this is probably one of the most interesting aspects of being on council at the moment. And I've looked at the empty shelves in the supermarket. I've looked at other things that are no longer sitting there for us, and how on earth are we as New Zealanders going to fix that up? I've also listened with great interest to the threatening war between China and America over what their next move is going to be. And it occurred to me that a lot of what we used to do in New Zealand now sits over there in China, and they could, you know, I think it's high time that this kind of industry looked at, hey, wait a minute, what if something like this goes ahead? And I would say, after listening to a lot of the news lately, that you know, and I wonder if it's time to also add into it and look at some of the stuff that you used to do, but somehow our young New Zealanders are going to have to get back to doing it themselves.
Yeah, we've enjoyed a huge period of kind of globalization where we've just kind of imported everything, stopped making things, and that goes for our food as well. You know, prawns from Vietnam, you know, produce from South America. It's getting a bit more difficult. So kind of sovereignty of food and other supplies is you know, is becoming an emerging issue, and combined with kind of localism, it's probably a good time to look at, you know, maybe a more diverse kind of production, including food production in our own backyard. We're seeing encroachment into produce growing areas in Pukekohe. So, you know, there's opportunities. There's been a number of new farming operations, goat, sheep milk, berries come along in the last little while. So we should be looking to that in our food and agriculture, Agritech supply. I mean, one of our most successful companies, BBC Technologies, now Tomra Foods, is just opening a research campus at the airport. You know, they've done the hard yards and prospered, and you know, that's going to be a global centre of innovation.
Thank you, Steve.
Going back to Lou's point, aviation, in 2012, aviation was the cool sector. We did amazingly well over 10 years in aviation, but we've seen the demise of CTC L3 flight training that used to train 180 international pilots a year. We saw the collapse of Pacific Aerospace and Alpha Aviation. I'm working with the new owners of Pacific Aerospace, who are now back up to 20 staff. We've seen the airport go from the second busiest airport in New Zealand in terms of aircraft movements to lose that completely. So there's a little bit of rethinking going on, but the fundamentals are still there with us.
Okay, that's Steve.
Yeah, that's certainly changing landscape, isn't it? Quite significantly changed. Right, does anybody else have any questions or comments for Steve? No? Great. Did you have any other points you wish to make, Steve, before you sneak off? There's intense interest in councillors being involved with the business community. So perhaps I'll work with Kirsty to work out a way to do that, and maybe there's an opportunity to have maybe some think pieces in different sectors looking to pull, you know, a sector group maybe around food and agriculture together. That might be the new year, but work can be done in the meantime. So thank you very much for your feedback. Really useful for me. Yeah,
Thanks,
that's awesome. That's awesome, Steve. Thanks very much for that. And some great points made. Right, so that moves us on then to our next workshop, which is the RMA Housing Enablement Bill, and we have Tony Crickfall and David Topman here for that. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Kia ora. I think with David's agreement, I'll share the screen. I'll get that going. so hopefully you can see that. So thank you. I'll kick off and doing a bit of a double team here and defer to David for matters relating to the submission. So I think you're relatively familiar. Some of you have seen this slide before with this bill. That's just an oversight of what's in the presentation. I think you're familiar with the background there. Just the key issues that have come up. Just a summary of those again: funding the impacts on infrastructure, lack of good design, urban design, housing at the cost of good community outcomes. That's about placemaking inconsistent with other government outcomes. It is a one-size-fits-all, so I think that's come through fairly clear in the feedback to government. And there are limited exemptions, so because it's one-size-fits-all, we don't have a lot of flexibility to tailor it to our particular needs. And it's what I'll call reacting rather than planning. Planning is making sense of a future environment that you know about. Reaction is just reacting to something that's happening, so it's the opposite of planning. Again, just a summary page there of the key issues and the impacts. It's the right intent, but the execution is flawed is probably the way to describe that. If I just jumped into those two last bullet points there, they're quite important. So under the proposed housing enablement bill, they haven't used all the tools that are available in the toolbox. So we have a national environmental standard. The government's used those previously for a couple of things. And it just seemed to us, why would you put all councils through another required plan change process that needs to be publicly consulted on when you've got a set of standards which we've been told we must use? So we're not quite sure what is behind that. And the last one we think is quite important too. So there's unprecedented powers in the bill to allow hearing commissioners, so the independent hearing commissioners, firstly, the ability to cross-examine, and that's never happened before with a council hearing. And secondly, and this is really unusual, to make decisions beyond the scope of submission. So normally, if you go through a plan change process, you get submitters, they put in what their thoughts are, and then the decision is made on the basis of those submissions and what the scope of them was. In this case, the bill as it's currently written allows the hearing commissioners, who are independent, remember, to make decisions that go beyond the scope of submissions, and it doesn't seem to be any threshold around what their scope is. That's really, really unusual. On the left, there's just a graphic example of what could be a good urban design outcome. I think that's a Hamilton example, and a poor urban design outcome. So we did a bit of plagiarisation, and Hamilton City Council was happy to use some of the graphics in their submission. Some of you have seen this before, but it's probably worth just going through them again in terms of what the outcome of this bill could be, and what it could be under a worst case scenario, and what it actually could be without any change to the bill itself if you got a developer who wanted to put some urban design components in it. So on the right hand side, if a developer wanted to build literally to what the new bill allows as a permitted activity without a resource consent, that's an outcome that could be achieved. And it's pretty graphically different from on the left-hand side. Same rules, same bulk, same location, but there's a bit of architectural design element that's introduced in there. When we presented this previously, a question did come up, well, is this a bit hypothetical? Is it really likely that any developer is really going to actually build something like this? Now, I guess my response to that is, the seasoned developers who do developments as a profession, if you like, for a living, they probably wouldn't do something like this because they know that the resale of it isn't that good. And most of those developers genuinely want to leave a place better than what it was. A lot of the developers in the development community have that as a genuine desire. Often it's hard to realise, but from the developers that we deal with, I'd be saying that none of them would probably want to seek that as an outcome. The problem with the bill is because it's so permissive, we'll be in situations that we had back in the late 90s in Christchurch that I'm familiar with mostly, but also Hamilton, where you got fly-by-night developers, so people who suddenly get the opportunity to put another couple of houses on, they can build up really big, and the building companies who they might hire to build, they have no real investment in the outcome, because for them it's cash flow and it's forward work. So it is a real scenario, I think, that we could get the inexperienced developers or those who want to dabble in the development market doing this kind of outcome because they can. This is just another graphic from a slightly different perspective, but you can see again the same kind of outcomes. And these things aren't hard to achieve, these design elements. They don't necessarily add a lot. You know, windows might be a little bit more expensive to include than blank walls, for example, but a lot of them aren't necessarily high value additions, but the value in the streetscape, the community, and also the resale value is much higher than what the cost of introducing these are. And that's just the last one as well. So as you know, we put a submission in, and I'll probably hand this over to David just to take you through the key submission points.
Thank you, Tony. Just to let you know, we lodged a submission on the 16th of October. So you may know from previous discussion that government announced this at very short notice. It was a 3-week turnaround in terms of consultation time allowed. So there's no opportunity to get a draft submission before any committee of council prior to lodging. So we had to use the Mayor's delegated authority to enable us to lodge a submission on the 16th of November. Also, very short notice, the select committee hearings on submissions was the literally, I think it was, literally the first week of, the last week of October into the first week of November. So very, very short turnaround time. And there was very strong opposition from all the future-proof partner councils to the bill. And there was agreement that we should try and work together to have a stronger impact on the select committee. And so our submission as lodged had 2 sections to it. It had a section that contained shared points with the future-proof council, our partner councils, and then part B, which was specifically Waipa points. And I'll also tell you, I'm going to bring a report to you on the 14th of December, the last meeting we had this year, where I will share that the lodge submission with you. Yeah.
Thank you, David. Can I just interrupt there for a moment? Roger has a question for you.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, David and Tony, and thank you very much for putting that submission in. And I'll just look through your slides and I'll look at that example of good urban design. But then, you know, immediately above that point where you talk about good urban design is the point it's inappropriate in many residential locations. And, you know, we've got a lot of special character streets on both sides, but particularly in Cambridge, and even a good urban design example being put on the corner of one of those special character locations would be a bad outcome. So it's not only good urban design, it's placement as well, which is really relevant. And there's not that much control in the proposed legislation.
Good point, Councillor Gordon. There is allowance in the bill for what they call qualifying matters. So in terms of where it applies in an urban environment, there is allowance for qualifying matters such as if you have a character area, it may well be excluded from these provisions in the bill. I did watch a number of submissions that were presented by other submitters to the select committee, just to get an idea of the kind of range of submissions coming in to them. And there was, I think, strong opposition to its blanket imposition, even for cities. Cities were generally, they were happy with the, as Tony outlined earlier, happy with the intent of the bill, but in terms of its implementation, it's it's literally a one-size-fits-all kind of solution to housing. And there's general agreement. It's probably going to result in some really bad outcomes that are going to be with us for a very long time, and we will live to regret. But it's also likely the bill's going to proceed, subject to amendment, and it is now a case of wait and see what the amendments are in terms of what they take on board from what they've heard from submitters. I can also say the submitters who included graphics, like the Hamilton City one, they took on board the value of having graphics to kind of portray key points submitters were making. So just in terms of our submission, going back to that, I think the key point for us was that argument about what is a tier 1 urban environment and what is it, its application. And being essentially a rural district with 2 medium-sized towns, that it shouldn't apply in our instance. Yes, it applies to the kind of that envelope around Hamilton, but it shouldn't apply to Cambridge, Te Amutu, Kirikiri. Where they go on that one, I don't know. There were no questions back to us when Mayor Jim spoke to our presentation. There were no questions back on that, but there was a question on what Tony mentioned about having an NES, a National Environmental Standard. In other words, to do what they propose as a standard rather than as an amendment to the RMA. Sorry, Mayor
David,
Jim,
I think Jim has a question, yeah.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, just quickly, look, totally support Dave's comments this morning, and the submission process was rushed through in terms of any chance for questions. Really, I don't know whether there was any, but just a comment that I think we've really got to avoid clip art in terms of what development's going to look like, because even the ones in our presentation this morning look nice and tidy, but they don't take account of the fact that each one of those houses has probably got 2 cars that's got to go somewhere. You know, the streetscape's really got to be included in anything that we're presenting, particularly when we're getting potentially 3 houses on a lot, and where are all these cars going to go? And I know we're pushing public transport, but it's going to be a long time before each house doesn't need at least 1 car. So look, I'm wondering, this is just like the 3 waters reform proposal. Is it time that we actually started making some public comments about this? Because in this case, we've got National and Labor coming together in a unified quick fix to try and solve a housing crisis, which is just going to create us medium-term problems. And we needed to be saying to the community that we're actually doing our best to avoid this sort of thing happening, but we're not looking after the best interests of our community if we sit silently by and just say, oh, well, the government's decided to do this and we've got to put up with it. It may be the end result, but I think at least we owe it to our community to be voice for us out there in our condemnation of knee-jerk reactions that are not going to deliver good housing outcomes for people in the long term.
Yeah, I agree, Jim. I wholeheartedly agree. Roger, have you got a question or comment?
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair, but just when Jim said there could be 3 families and 3 cars in one of those units, there could possibly be 9 occupants with 9 cars. If it's 3 units and 3 floors per unit, you know, somebody wanted to really put high density occupancy in there, we could have 9 cars on the street. That's not really a good outcome, is it?
I think, if I may respond, there were a good many submissions from urban design people working in city environments, not even in towns like Cambridge, Te Muru Kihi, who pointed out that there were already good measures in place that enabled that kind of good mix of housing types, and they've been well thought through, and they provided for urban design considerations. They provided for things like parking, where rubbish bins are going to go. And there was almost unanimous feeling that as it's currently worded, the bill is not helpful. And the other thing is, isn't the issue affordable housing rather than housing? And there was a feeling that by a lot of submitters that housing is actually addressed, but housing affordability is the issue that's not addressed. And simply bumping up supply or potential supply is not going to address the housing affordability issue.
Claire, did you want to add something there? Doesn't look like you do. No, she's having problems with her mute. Yeah, okay. I think Claire's point has made this point in the past, haven't you, around questionable economies made of scale of when you're building 3 stories, and about how it doesn't really address the issue of affordability. And of course, that compound to that, or dovetailing into our last workshop about supply chains, and it's just inflation. It's just snowballing, really, isn't it? So anyway, back to you, Dave.
So if there's no further question on the submissions, there's a couple more slides which this dovetails nicely into the housing affordability component, because we do have Plan Change 21. So what happens if the bill does proceed? And as David said, our expectation is that in some way or form, the bill is likely to go through as an act. I think there's enough government support behind it, but we don't quite know what the format of that will be, and there may be some changes to it. I guess luckily for Waipa, we have Plan Change 21, which is already on our radar. We have staff working on it. We have it resourced, we have it budgeted. And Plan Change 21 includes within the scope the kind of things that the Housing Enablement Bill is trying to achieve. So it includes housing affordability and inclusionary zoning. Plan Change 21 includes stronger urban design across all our urban areas. It does include residential intensification, and the way that we framed that is that's implementing the NPS for urban development. So it's certainly within the scope of the Housing Enablement Bill, or Plan Change 21 has that within its scope as well. And also included looking at covenants, whether we can put any restrictions on or have the ability to restrict private covenants, because they can increase unaffordability as well. So if it was to proceed, what we're thinking is that we would utilise a streamlined planning process if it was an advantage to us in terms of efficiency and outcomes and effectiveness. If we had that option, if it was mandated, we wouldn't have a choice around that. In the last item there on that slide, we already have budget, we have resources, and we have a timeline which is roughly aligned with the HEB. So for Plan Change 21, we're looking at loosely notifying that mid-2022, and the Housing Enablement Bill, currently that says notification by August 2022. So roughly they're aligned.
Yeah, I see you've managed to work out your mute.
Yeah, thanks. Technical difficulties. Well, just moving on to that Plan Change 21, Tony, which I'm absolutely all for, but inclusionary zoning is in there, and you'd signalled earlier that there's a worry that developers are going to resist that there'll be challenges to it, and in a way it's a bit of a pity that the HEB isn't addressing that if that was a national environmental standard or whatever, we wouldn't have to sort of fend off the developer community with that, because I heard that Queenstown had a hard time trying to get it in, and in fact they've used a particular local example or feature to get it through, whereas we might not be able to make use of that. So have you got any comments about that?
Yeah, so our consultant has finished the first part of the issues and options report on Plan Change 21, which was to look at affordable housing. We haven't presented that yet because what we wanted to do is present a package of that plus the other issues and options that he's going to report on. So then you'd have everything together. Because we think that intensification, urban design and affordability kind of all is part of the same thing. What his recommendation is, and this was the same consultant, David Mead, who was advising Queenstown Lakes District Council. So he was helping them with their policy changes down there. So he's very familiar with it. And he's done some international research as well. So his recommendation is in his issues and options is that inclusionary zoning is and can be effective and efficient. It's used, it's default in the UK planning system. It's used in the US planning system. Australia are trying to get it in as a mandatory zoning tool. And so from what we know, it is a tool that's available. We can use it. It seems to be efficient and it seems to be effective. The problem that we've got though is central government isn't buying into it. So the recommendation again is that it should be mandatory, and that's international research. And that's certainly Queenstown experience when they tried to put it in a policy framework. Well, their first round, they tried to make it mandatory. They got sufficient kickback in that they put it in as kind of a voluntary option. And that was their success, as they were working with developers who were willing developers. The current plan changes are looking at reinserting it as a mandatory requirement. The reason I think, well, I'm not quite entirely sure the reason for central government's resistance to mandating it, but there are national discussions with community housing providers that Waipa staff are involved in, where MFE are party to that, Treasury are party to that, Department of Internal Affairs are party to that. And the three government entities don't appear to have a strong appetite for supporting inclusionary zoning. Treasury seem to think that it could be done, but they're looking heavily at the economics and they're saying, well, there could be some perverse outcomes if we required it on housing and on development. But that's certainly not the overseas experience. Kaiga Ora has put out a statement to the effect that they have legal advice that inclusionary zoning is unlawful. That's contrary to the advice that Queenstown Lakes District Council has, and contrary to certainly advice that Wellington City Council has commissioned. So they have legal advice to the contrary. And we, from our perspective, we're not aware of anything in the RMA that would preclude it as a tool that we can use. So there's some big discussions, and what you're likely to see when we report back on Plan Change 21, the issues and options, is certainly the recommendation is it's a tool that we should at least consider. And the recommendation is that if we consider it, we should try and make it mandatory. But we know we've got a plan change process. We know that there's submissions. We know there's opposition. We know there's appeals. So you can see what that might end up with.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to present this one. This is a graphic, again, that we thought would be quite useful in terms of what Plan Change 21 seeks to achieve. And we don't think that the Housing Amendment Bill would achieve this. So it's kind of gradiated zoning, I suppose. So on the left-hand side, we've got rural zoning. So that's just a file image there. Large lot residential from the Waipa district. I'm not sure how good the geography of the councillors are, but if anyone can identify where that is, then might get a prize for that. Standard residential.
Ashgrove. Yeah. Isn't it?
I think so. I don't actually know myself.
And TA.
Okay. But it is a Waipa example. Standard residential, that is Te Awamutu. And if along the top there, you can see kind of the height profiles. Medium density residential, we think this one's pretty cool because this was a graphic image and a sketch of the application for Cambridge Park. This is what the developer told us it would look like. And they've actually developed true to form. So if you go down there now, it's very, very similar or close to what the image was presented to us. We often get in applications that are presented to us graphics, which look really nice, but then the delivery looks like it's something completely different. Then we got town centres. I've already spoken a little bit about those, and they've got commercial industrial. So these 7 Cs here from the Urban Design Protocol, that's a New Zealand protocol, where our councils are signatory to that. This is about the what, and then this is about the how. How do we achieve these things? So we think that we've already got a reasonably good plan in place. We've already got different zones. Plan Change 21 is looking to, I suppose, tailor those a little bit more. And we think we can achieve a pretty good outcome across our district. HEB, as you've heard, is really unplanned outcomes. It's 3 stories, 3 houses, all residential zones as it's currently proposed. And so we get this without the urban design. It excludes large lot residential, but in standard residential, you can imagine, 3 stories in all of this is one of the most extreme outcomes. So mostly covered by Plan Change 21. For the building team, because there's no resource consents that would be needed, it would result in probably a significant increase in unplanned and unbudgeted building consents that we'd have to gear up to. It might not be the 3 stories, it might be tiny homes, it might be an additional second home, whereas at the moment you need a resource consent and a building consent for that. Unplanned, unbudgeted, we're not ready for that. Services, again, unplanned, unbudgeted. And I'm talking to at least one local developer. He's got no idea where this housing enablement bill might be taken up across the district. And he couldn't share any information on where, these things might occur. And so it's impossible to forecast and plan ahead for infrastructure that we might need. And also parks and reserves, if we are densifying the residential zones, then our demand for levels of service increase, libraries, parks, reserves, and again, all unplanned and unbudgeted. So we have a kind of a solution in Plan Change 21, but we might have something that is imposed on us that we're not happy with. All we can really do at the moment in terms of next steps is wait for the outcome of the select committee and see where they've ended up. If it turns into an act, then we'll just report back on what that means for us, and we'll integrate that into Plan Change 21 as well as we can. If nothing proceeds, then we've already got a plan for intensification anywhere under Plan Change 21.
Thanks, Tony. Anybody have any questions for him or David in respect of the presentation? It's reasonably depressing, I'd have to say, Tony, but that's not your fault.
Yeah, I agree, Susan. Yeah.
Very depressing.
Yeah. I just, for the life of me, can't understand why it got cross-party support. It just, a small rush of blood to the head or something. I don't know,
but that's what it seems to me, Susan. It was a rush of blood to the head. No, nobody thought it through, or even thought to ask local government what impact it would have. It's a short-term solution. We all want affordable houses and everybody properly housed, but this isn't going to achieve it. And as I think Tony was just saying, it's likely to happen. And what are we going to do about it? And at the moment, it's only just seeking publicity, putting our points of view out there, so the community know that it's not with our support that it's gone through.
Been a couple of rushes of blood to the head in that department in the last week.
Oh, not more, please.
Well, we've got a vote today, so the rush of blood to the head was an email, wasn't it, from somebody who wondered what the hell was going on.
I guess partly, and maybe it's a bit facetious, but if an act goes through that we are not happy with and we can't live with it, do nothing might be an option. There's no sanctions if we didn't do a mandated plan change. Apart from, I guess, perhaps central government having some kind of blacklist of councils who aren't going as fast as they'd like. That's not unusual, and that's happened in the past, where councils, for example, have lagged behind the statutory review of regional plans, and they haven't fulfilled the requirements of the Act in terms of the timeframes and delivery. Again, there's no sanctions, so that may well be something that we bring back to you as a potential option.
Well, thanks, Tony. I like that. Liz, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Tony, look, what we do know, of course, is that these changes aren't necessarily going to be good for our particular towns. And what I'm really interested to look at the report that you do bring back based on that, because, I know in an ideal world, what we always want to do is we want to be compliant, we want to work with everybody, but maybe this time just doesn't suit Waipa. So yeah, I'm interested in what next steps we could potentially take to not proceed with these changes or these suggested changes.
Yeah, I agree, Liz. But it is becoming a big pattern.
Sadly. Right. Well, on that really depressing note, I guess we should wind this one up.
Yep.
Before we all go off and have a cry somewhere, we've got another workshop, but we will have to move into public excluded in order to do so. So thank you, Tony and David, for your hard work.
Thank you.
I look forward to hearing from you in due course.